people do not learn this is, well, if you let it, it's depressing. But more than that, it is extremely instructive in how we can never assume that issues are solved forever or for any substantive length of time, because we have an institution out there that is attempting to revise history and lie and break down every success that we have and tell the American people that what just happened didn't happen. But we have fought this taxes on the rich, class envy thing. I'm into the 31st year of this program. It's been a central part of this program for all 31 years. Ronald Reagan assumed office. Top marginal tax rate was 70%. We had just had 2 recessions. Jimmy Carter, in his 4 years, had literally destroyed the United States economy in any number of ways. And Reagan instituted tax rate reductions, which after 8 years took the top marginal rate from 70% to 28%. And the amount of revenue that those tax rates created for the U.S. Treasury doubled. It was incredible. Lowering rates from 70% to 28%, the top marginal rate, 70 to 28, doubled revenue. But that wasn't the first time. The first time this happened was actually JFK in 1962. Famous speech to the Economic Club of New York, in which he advocated for the reduction. At that point, the top marginal tax rate was 90%. Now, nobody paid that. We need to do a separate little class here on what marginal tax rates are, because I guarantee you, I watched a tech blog video. Some snarky little tech guy thought he had figured it out. He put together a video to explain to other millennials what marginal tax rates are. And instead of rates and brackets, he used pockets, like back pockets in your jeans, to explain the different brackets. So they're not brackets, they're margins. And by the time this guy finished, it's no wonder millennials have no idea what they're hearing or thinking when tax the rich at 70%, 90%, what it really means. But my point is, we had people alive and kicking all throughout the 80s. And Ronald Reagan was known for cutting taxes and defeating the Soviet Union and rebuilding the U.S. military. Those are the 3 prongs, the 3 legs of the Reagan stool. He succeeded in all of them. My point is that people were alive. They were living the economic rebound, the massive new number of jobs, rising wages, massive reduction in interest rates, home mortgages becoming affordable again, unemployment going way down. People lived it, and they still apparently didn't remember it, because by the time we got to 1992, Bill Clinton was campaigning on Reaganomics being trickled down, and Hillary too, trickled down economics. It didn't work. It failed. It was tax cuts for the rich. You've heard the drill. And that only the rich get rich and the poor got poor, and the income gap widens, and and the rich aren't paying their fair share, despite living through it. People were able to have their minds changed about the value of tax cuts. It was stunning to me. I thought back then, okay, we've won this one. People will finally learn the value of proper rate taxation. Nope. The emotional appeal to class envy and resentment of people who have more than you, with a lot of people, will overcome any sense of history, fact, or common sense. So here we are. We've had, similar to the Reagan tax cuts with Trump, the same thing has happened. An economy that was moribund under Obama has been revitalized. It is growing like wildfire. Trump has renegotiated trade deals that have helped American manufacturing rebound. It's all good. It's all good money. The Democrat Party and the media are continuing to savage the tax cuts to say that they have caused great harm, that they have resulted in a widening income gap. The rich are not paying their fair share. Now we've got a whole slew of young Democrat millennials seeking new power on the basis of the tax code is unfair. We got to totally redo it. We need 70% tax on the rich, 90% tax on the rich. If people learned, if people were able to learn and remember, these people would be laughed out of politics in their campaign. There ought not be any thinking, engaged American who hears raise taxes on the rich to 70% who does anything but laugh. The power of emotion. The power of emotion combined with envy and jealousy. And don't forget, the Democrat Party, the American left, are all about hatred and promoting the feeling of hatred toward other people. And so they capitalize on this, and they can't afford for this tax cut reality to actually be learned. They can't afford for the idea that people keeping more of what they earn actually causes the economy to grow. They can't afford for that to take hold. Every time I mention this, people say to me, Rush, did you tell me that Reagan's massive tax rate reductions caused revenue to the government to double? Yes, almost. It was like from 500 billion to 490, to almost 890, 900 trillion. So it was close to doubling. And people say, well, but since the libs like big government, why don't they accept that? Why don't they like the fact that lowering taxes creates all this new money? Because it's not about funding government, because they don't care whether the government's in debt or not. What they care about is being able to talk about fairness and unfairness and envy. And the Democrats know that when you're talking about the rich and the middle class, there's about 1,000 times more middle class people than there are rich. In other words, there's 1,000 to 2,000 times more middle class voters than there are rich voters. And so you keep bashing the rich, even though tax cuts generate all kinds of new money for Washington. I've even heard Democrats, it's not about that. It's about the rates. It's unfair that some guy's only paying 28% when his secretary's paying 25%. It's not fair. Yeah, that doesn't sound right, Mabel. You know what? It doesn't. Well, we're doing great here, Mabel, but maybe some other people aren't out there. This is how it all builds on itself. Well, at some point, as Margaret Thatcher always said, the socialists are going to run out of other people's money. At some point, your taxation of the rich stops being taxation, becomes confiscation. When you start taking 70% of what people earned, even if it's the marginal rate, and I don't have time to explain what marginal rates are, but the 70% marginal rate is not 70% on everything, except for certain people it is. If you make right now over, I think, $1 million or $1.5 million, you pay the top rate on every dollar you earn. You don't pay 10% on the first 5,000, 28% on the next 30,000. Those are the brackets. Those are the margins. The top margin is 70%. They want it to be. At some point, people are going to stop paying it. They're going to leave. They're going to do whatever they can to avoid being financially raped like that. And this has begun to happen now in New York. And I am happy to say that I was at the forefront of the exodus in 1997. I played golf with President Trump on Sunday, and we talked about this. And he was telling me so many people in New York he knows that are leaving precisely because of this. Well, Governor Cuomo was complaining about this just recently with the numbers. And what Governor Cuomo has been forced to do is come out and directly contradict Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. He is out saying raising taxes on the rich is stupid, it's dumb, we can't afford it, we can't do it. Just yesterday, they put out a poll that said 70% of the American people support taxing the rich. The Democrats were cheering. Here comes Andrew Cuomo. Well, I'll explain why what has gone wrong in New York, what's happened right after this. Governor Cuomo said Monday he announced a dramatic drop in state income tax revenue, $2.8 billion, which he says is going to prompt him to have to revise his budget and reconsider spending on schools, health care, and repairs. They're not going to have as much money to spend. Cuomo blamed the shortfall on a federal tax plan backed by Trump. Cuomo said the law's cap on deductions for state and local taxes at $10,000 was to blame and suggested that it is anecdotally triggering high earners to leave New York. The hole in revenue in December, which some analysts have called a December surprise, and continued poor performance of the New York economy in January have created a $2.3 billion drop in anticipated tax revenues. Add to that the $500 million drop in revenues for December the Cuomo administration had projected, and the revenue hole is $2.8 billion. Now, this thing they're blaming on the Trump tax is called SALT, and that's the state and local tax deduction that was no longer allowed. I love it, by the way, but Cuomo said it literally restructured the economy to help red states at the cost of blue states, which is exactly what it did. It was a diabolical political maneuver. But why should red states be subsidizing rich Northeasterners who are escaping the high tax rates that their states have imposed on them? Why should federal taxpayers be subsidizing these people? If you're going to vote for people that are going to charge you a top tax rate of 14%, and then you're going to spend the rest of your life trying to avoid it, well, then don't vote for it in the first place. But then don't ask us to pay for it. Cuomo warned that the loss of revenue could not be made up by continuing to tax the rich, the top 1%, who already contribute 48% of all New York tax revenue. He said, I don't believe in raising taxes on the rich. God forbid if the rich leave. Exactly. The top 1% of New York, who Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is not paying her fair share, and all these other nit brains said they're not paying their fair share, are already, the top 1% are paying 48%. The top 1% is 93,000 tax returns. They have 31% of the income, and they're paying 48% of all the taxes, the top 1%. Let's go to the audio sound bites. Here is Governor Cuomo yesterday in Albany with a press conference on all of this.
SALT was an economic civil war. It literally restructured the economy to help red states at the cost of blue states. That's exactly what it did. It was a diabolical political maneuver in the tax code. We are now seeing in the receipts the effect of SALT. The collections are down to about 30% of the target.
Right.
That is about a $2.3 billion drop in revenues. $2.3 billion as a drop at this point in revenues is as serious as a heart.
He's speaking for first graders here. I'm not going to air number 9. I'm going to tell you what he says in it because I need to get to the meat. In the next bite, he says, he speaks so damn slow. It's just getting to go nuts here. He said, these changes fundamentally restructured our economy. People are mobile. They pick up their laptop and they move. They literally pack up their computer and you move to another state. You do business over the computer, which means you're doing business in that state and you're taxed in that state, not in New York, and we're losing it. We can't keep losing people this way. It's not SALT driving out people, Governor Cuomo. It's your own independent tax rate, your irresponsible spending, and the fact that you've kept coming back and coming back and coming back and soaking the rich over and over and over again, and there's nothing to show for it. You've got a crumbling infrastructure. You've got a widening income gap. You've got nothing to show for all this money that you've been collecting. So now here is Cuomo admitting what you never hear a Democrat admit, what you never hear a leftist admit.
1% of the taxpayers
Speed it up.
Pay nearly half of all the taxes. Top 5%, 63% of all the revenue. Top 10%, 74% of all the revenue. tax the rich, tax the rich, tax the rich. We did. Now, God forbid the rich leave. Before SALT, a New York City taxpayer paid about 45%. After SALT, that tax increase goes up about 12%. A taxpayer in Florida would see no increase, probably would see a decrease, and Florida also has the advantage of no estate tax.
Yeah.
This is going to be the tipping point.
Right, and you don't see Florida running out of money the way you people are, with no state income tax and no estate tax. That's why I fled down here in 1997. And here's what the governor in 2009, David Patterson, said when he found out the reason I moved out of New York.
If I knew that would be the result, I would have thought about the taxes earlier.
He was asked about me leaving. If I would have known we could have gotten limbo, I would have raised taxes sooner. So I've been down here since 1997. My parents taught me never to talk about money, that it's impolite, not good manners, rude, and all that. I would love to tell you, I was audited for 12 years by these people after I left. I had to prove 14 different ways for every day of the year where I was, because they did not believe me when I told them I was never there. You would not believe. And so now I have a deal. Whatever I spend a day working in New York, I owe X. I would love to tell you what that number is, but I'm not going to because I was raised properly. But I don't go there. And it's not the money. It's the whole principle of the thing. It's not that I can't afford to go work in New York. It's just that I'm not going to give them the money. And that's why I left in 1997. To all kinds of criticism that I was being selfish and not thinking of other people. Well, I was just however many years 97 is from today ahead of the game. I mean, I've explained more. That was tailored to the specifics of New York and Cuomo's problem. But the concept of how tax cuts result in economic booms, which is not an opinion, it's fact as demonstrated by the American economy. I must have explained it easily 100 times over all these years. And the point the emailer was making was one I made, that it just doesn't seem to hold. People don't seem to really grasp it, even when they live through it. Even when the knee-jerk reaction by now ought to be that if somebody starts talking about seriously reducing taxes, people automatically applaud because of the resulting economic activity. Now, you reach a point where you can't do that. I mean, you can't lower taxes to zero, for example, because every time taxes are cut, they creep back up. The top marginal rate's not 28% like it was in 1989 when Ronaldus Magnus left office. It's now 39%, right? It creeps back up there. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to attempt, before we move on to other things, I'm going to attempt here to explain marginal tax rates, because I saw this crazy attempt at doing it on one of my tech blogs. Some tech whiz was trying to justify Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's claim that taxing the rich would work and that it was morally fine and should be done. So this guy